we have been working on this book for a few months now, and we're finally going to finish it today. We're going to finish our Read Aloud book. Here we go. Chapter 20. The plants did behave well most of the time. They were allowed to help around the house by dusting, but only when the boys stood by to catch anything they knocked over. By the end of October, the weather was cold almost every day, so the plants couldn't stay outside. For Halloween, Dad and Mom let the boys put king-size sheets over Stanley and Fluffy. Greeting trick-or-treaters who came to the door, they were a big hit. But Mom refused to consider pilgrim costumes for Thanksgiving. Norman was disappointed, but he perked up when Michael suggested a Christmas plan. "Stanley and Fluffy can be our Christmas tree," he said. "Very funny," said Mom. "No, really," he said. "We'll stand them together in the living room and decorate them. It'll save money if we don't have to buy a tree. They can do it every year." Dad remarked, "They'd be an awfully odd-looking Christmas tree." Norman said, "We'll have to undecorate them every night. If they eat the lights and ornaments, they'll die." Michael replied, "Not if we make the decorations out of socks and don't put any lights on them." "There would be one advantage," said Mom. "We wouldn't have to be vacuuming up pine needles every day." Dad said, "And we wouldn't have to stand around arguing at the Christmas tree lot about which one to buy. Okay, let's give Stanley and Fluffy a try." On Christmas Eve, the boys rolled the plants into the living room and started putting on the decorations they had bought. 12 pairs of Christmas socks in tiny sizes. The different designs were of Santas, pine trees, snowman, holly, and reindeer wearing ice skates. They split up the pairs and hung 12 different ones on each plant. Stanley didn't like where Michael hung one sock. The plant plucked it off and handed it back to him. Michael tried a different spot. Stanley seemed to find that one more comfortable. "Maybe they won't eat these socks," said Michael. "They'll have their regular ones to eat." "I hope so," said Norman. "That way we won't have to buy new decorations every day." Mom and Dad agreed that the plants looked pretty good. All evening, neighbors dropped in for eggnog and goodies. Some of them probably thought it was weird to use the plants as Christmas trees and socks for decorations, but they were too polite to say so. When the Kramers stopped in, Kyle did not lunge for the plants. He pointed up at the little red and green socks hanging on them and said, "Pretty, pretty." Michael took a pair down and gave them to him. His mother took his shoes off and put the new socks on. Kyle was so delighted that he ran around the living room beaming. He refused to let his mother put his shoes back on. After everyone went home, Michael hung 8 fudge ripple socks along the mantel over the fireplace. Dad said, "We're not putting the presents under the plants tonight. We'll keep them in the dining room with the door closed and bring them out in the morning." Norman said, "I just wrote a poem." "You didn't write anything down," replied Michael. "I wrote it in my mind," insisted Norman. "Okay," said Dad, "let's hear it." Norman stood in front of the fireplace, cleared his throat, and recited, "The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, but they would be gone when Santa got there." They all burst out laughing. "That's a good one," said Dad. "You better write that one down." Soon Norman began pestering Mom and Dad to let him open one present. Mom finally said, "All right, you can both open the gifts Grandma sent you." Norman ran into the dining room. Sounds of ripping paper and cardboard were followed by loud, "Yippee!" Then from the dining room rolled a remote-controlled truck, trailed by Norman with the remote. "This is great," he said. He sent it running around from room to room. It kept bumping into walls and furniture as he tried to get the control under control. Michael brought his present into the living room and ripped it open. "Oh no," said Mom. "Another one." Michael sent his truck off down the hall. Dad sighed. He said to Mom, "You know what's coming." "Yes," she said. Truck races, truck crashes, dueling trucks, and nicks in the furniture. They made the boys park their new toys in the dining room and go to bed. Late that night, Mom, Dad, Michael, and Norman were nestled all snug in their beds. Perhaps even visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. But Stanley and Fluffy made such a clatter that Norman woke up to see what was the matter. When he stepped into the hall, he almost got run over by a speeding plant. Stanley was hanging onto a truck with 2 vines and operating the control with 2 others. In the living room, Fluffy was hanging onto the other truck and zooming it around, bumping into furniture. Stanley zoomed back into the living room and knocked over a lamp. They were having a Christmas tree race. The end. Now, this is the last book that we read in class, but it's not the last book in the series. There are other Plant That Ate Dirty Socks books. I have some of them. So here's the deal I'm going to make with you guys. If we had been in class, we probably would have read more books. But because we weren't, if you want to keep reading this series starting next year in September, come and talk to me. I know you'll be in grade 4 next year. I know I won't get to be your teacher next year. But you can always come down the hall and say, Mrs. Wyant, can I please borrow the next Plant That Ate Dirty Socks book? And I would be happy to share those books with you. They're pretty hilarious. And as you can tell from the end of this one, Fluffy and Stanley are learning how to move themselves around on remote-controlled trucks. That's gonna get interesting. So I hope you liked these books. Keep reading over the summer. And I will talk to you later.